Let's start with the Canadiens versus the Bruins. This is the oldest and angriest rivalry in hockey. It kicked off in 1924 and still hasn't cooled down. We're talking almost 100 years of pure chaos. It's not just players, it's entire cities that hate each other. Maurice Richard versus Milt Schmidt, Bobby Orr versus Guy Lafleur, Chara and Lucic versus Subban and Price. That's just scratching the surface. They've clashed in 18 playoff series, and it never gets boring. Richard's suspension caused literal riots in Montreal. Boston brought the toughness, and Montreal brought the fire. The fans? They live for this. Even when the teams aren't fighting for the cup, every match still feels like a war zone. Now take that heat and turn it inward. Canadiens versus Maple Leafs is like Canada fighting itself. It's English versus French, Toronto versus Montreal. This started in 1917, the very first NHL game. Since then, it's become Canada's Civil War. Montreal stacked up 24 Stanley Cups and became the pride of French Canada. Toronto, with 13 cups, stood for English Canada's hockey dreams. The Leafs haven't won since 1967, but that doesn't matter. The hate is alive and well. When Montreal came back to beat them in the 2021 playoffs, it was like salt in an open wound. Every game between them, pure tension. Saturday night in Canada, you better believe everyone's watching. But if you're a Leafs fan, there's another name that makes your blood boil: the Bruins. Leafs versus Bruins is trauma in real time. Ask any Toronto fan about 2013. They'll whisper 4-1 with a 1,000-yard stare. Game 7. Up by 3 goals with 10 minutes left, and they blew it. Lucic, Krejci, and Bergeron crushed the Leafs in overtime. And that was just the beginning. 2018, 2019, 2 more Game 7 heartbreaks. Different years, same pain. The Bruins turned into Toronto's playoff nightmare. Always tougher, always meaner. Every time they meet, it's like ripping off an old scab. Speaking of fights that turn into wars, nothing gets hotter than the Battle of Alberta. Flames versus Oilers. In the 80s, it was Gretzky's Edmonton versus Lanny McDonald's Calgary. 5 playoff matchups in 8 years. It was violent, it was wild, and it was Canadian hockey at its most savage. Then, for a while, it went quiet. But when Connor McDavid and Matthew Tkachuk entered the scene, boom, the fire came back. Tkachuk bullied Cassian shift after shift. Then came the 2022 playoffs. Goals, punches, chaos. The Oilers are on top now, but the Flames are still clawing to catch up. This isn't just a rivalry, it's a war that never sleeps. Now jump to Penguins versus Capitals. This one's about 2 names, Crosby and Ovechkin. Since 2005, they've owned the NHL spotlight. Sid's Penguins were cool, calculated, and winners. Ovi's Capitals were electric and hungry. They met in the playoffs 3 years in a row, 2016 to 2018. Pittsburgh won 2 of them. But in 2018, the Caps finally broke through. Ovechkin to Kuznetsov, OT winner, Penguins out, Caps win the cup. It was more than a win, it was revenge after years of pain. And those games, absolute prime time. Big hits, insane goals, ridiculous saves. Even as Crosby and Ovi get older, when these 2 teams clash, it still feels like everything's on the line. And if you're talking about rivalries built on pure hate, Rangers versus Islanders is New York's turf war. The Islanders were the little brother in the 70s, dumped right in Rangers territory. But in the 80s, they roared. 4 straight cups, 19 straight playoff wins. Rangers fans could only watch in silence. Then came 1994. The Rangers finally won, and the fight shifted. This rivalry gave us fights that emptied benches and fans brawling in parking lots. And who could forget 2018, when John Tavares left the Islanders for Toronto and was booed like a traitor every time he came back? Even when both teams stink when they play each other, it's war. Then there's the Blackhawks versus Red Wings. Pure old-school hate. This one goes way back to 1926. Chicago versus Detroit. Steel versus motor. Grit versus grit. In the early years, you had legends like Gordie Howe and Bobby Hull throwing punches and scoring goals. Then, in the 90s, it got even nastier. Yzerman battling Roenick, Chelios switching sides, and those wild nights at Joe Louis Arena. By the 2000s, it became a clash of dynasties. Zetterberg, Lidstrom, and Datsyuk versus Kane, Hossa, and Keith. They played 20 playoff series. That's a lot of bruises, overtime heartbreakers, and trash talk. Even when Detroit moved to the Eastern Conference in 2013, the fire didn't go out. Every Winter Classic or throwback game brings the heat back like it's 1985 all over again. But if you want to talk pure, undiluted hatred, nothing compares to Avalanche versus Red Wings. In the late 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't hockey. It was full-blown warfare. These were two dynasties at their peak. Colorado had Sakic, Forsberg, and Roy. Detroit had Yzerman, Fedorov, and Shanahan. The blood really started in 1996. Claude Lemieux destroyed Chris Draper with a cheap hit that broke his face. That lit the fuse. Next season, March 26, 1997, Fight Night at the Joe. Darren McCarty hunted Lemieux, dropped him, and the benches emptied. Goalies fought. Fans lost their minds. McCarty even scored the OT winner. Every time they played, it was mayhem. No lead was safe. No shift was clean. They hated each other, and they were also the best teams in the league. Between 1996 and 2002, they won 5 Stanley Cups combined. The rivalry cooled down eventually, but if you were around then, you never forget it. And now, shift to Ontario, Senators versus Maple Leafs. This one caught fire in the late 90s and early 2000s. They faced each other 4 times in the playoffs between 2000 and 2004. The Leafs won every single time, and Ottawa fans have never forgiven them. It wasn't just hockey, it was personal. Captains Daniel Alfredsson and Mats Sundin were always clashing. Darcy Tucker became Ottawa's #1 villain. Every whistle turned into a scrum. Then, both teams kind of fell off. No more playoffs, no more fire. But guess what? It never really died. Now the Leafs are hunting for cups and the Senators are rising with young talent and swagger. When they play, it's loud, it's dirty, and it feels like the tension from 2 decades ago is about to explode again. Ottawa wants revenge. Toronto better watch their back. And out west, Kings versus Sharks, California's coldest war. This one didn't come from tradition, it came from pain. In 2013, the Kings pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in NHL history, coming back from down 0-0 to beat the Sharks in Game 7. San Jose fans never recovered. The next year, another 7-game series. More fights, more bruises, more hate. Even the regular season games turned into playoff-style wars. Logan Couture versus Anze Kopitar, Joe Thornton versus Dustin Brown. Every hit had weight. Every goal felt like betrayal. And for once, California hockey was no joke. These teams made the league respect the West. And even now, with both teams rebuilding, when they meet, it's still personal. And if you want to talk about battles that tore a province in half, Canadiens versus Nordiques was exactly that. Montreal versus Quebec City. This wasn't just hockey. It was language, culture, and pride on the line. The Canadiens were the kings of tradition. Stanley Cups, old money, history. The Nordiques were the underdogs, gritty, working class, hungry to prove themselves. Every game felt like a fight for the soul of Quebec. And when they met in the playoffs, especially in the 80s, it exploded. The 1984 Good Friday Brawl, over 250 penalty minutes. It was mayhem before the puck even dropped. Montreal won the last playoff battle in 1993 and went on to win the cup. The Nordiques never got another shot. They moved to Colorado in 1995 and won the cup the next year. But Quebec never forgot. If the NHL brings back a team to Quebec City, that rivalry won't just return, it'll erupt. And finally, Flyers versus Penguins, Pennsylvania's war. This one is full-on rage. The Flyers became the Broad Street Bullies, elbows up, fists ready. The Penguins had style, speed, and Mario Lemieux's magic. It was rough, it was nasty, and it got even worse when Sidney Crosby showed up. Philly fans hated him from day one and let him know with every boo and every cheap shot. Crosby answered by winning again and again. The 2012 playoffs were absolute chaos. 56 goals in 6 games. Line brawls, suspensions. Giroux flattened Crosby, and Flyers fans lost it. But Pittsburgh always seemed to get the last laugh. It's not just about hockey, it's personal warfare. Every time these two meet, something wild happens, and neither side is ever ready to back down.